the Oklahoman newsroom. It's time for an OSU update. I'm Jenny Carlson here in studio with columnist Barry Trammell and OSU beat writer Nathan Ruiz. Guys, time to take an extended look at OSU basketball, and boy, the roller coaster continues. Nathan, I mean, fantastic on those weekend games. Weeknight games, almost a disaster. Let's start with the fact that you had a chance to have a conversation with Joe Lunardi, who does the bracketology for ESPN. What was the takeaway from that conversation for you? Well,
he doesn't think OSU is really in the outlook at this point. He has 7 Big 12 teams in right now. Baylor is among his first 4 out. Texas kind of in the last 4 in. So there's some teams jockeying for position. OSU in that 8 to 10 range in the Big 12. He didn't want to say that last night's loss to Kansas State was a dagger, but he certainly made it sound that way just given what OSU has left. Very difficult to come back. Obviously, it's possible OSU could run off a 4-1 stretch or even a 5-0 stretch, but it's just hard to imagine given that there's 3 road games, challenging environments, and then the remaining 2 home games are against Texas Tech and Kansas, the top 2 teams in the Big 12. As you mentioned, the roller coaster continues now 0-8 in Big 12 weekday games where they're 5-0 on Saturdays. Now lost 3 straight home games in Gallagher Arena despite winning games in Kansas and in West Virginia. So there's not a whole lot making sense for the Cowboys right now. They're trying to piece it together. Mike Boynton's trying to figure it out. But he said, you know, we're all kind of looking for something. We're all searching for something. But at the end of the day, the Cowboys just aren't executing. That execution, that focus just isn't there.
You know, a week ago we're sitting here and, you know, it looked like the runway was running out for the Cowboys, Barry. And then they go to West Virginia and get a win that we didn't expect. And you thought, oh, maybe they've extended it. But losing that game to K-State last night, a team that they played pretty well, or at least we thought so, played pretty well at Manhattan, didn't win that game, but just didn't play well at all in Stillwater on Wednesday night against the Wildcats. Seems like that runway, while it's not gone entirely, boy, that really changed the length of it at this point.
It's a mystifying team. I mean, just look at their last 3 home games. They played TCU, Baylor, Kansas State, you know, not the upper crust of the Big 12, and they're really not in any of the 3 games. You know, they got blown out early by K-State. The other 2, they're just sort of hanging on a little bit, and they end up, you know, trying to stay within single digits, and I don't understand it. But it is, I would have to say that Joe Lunardi is right. I mean, it's a sign that this team is just not that good, and for whatever reason, they can get up against some good teams and play well, but I'm afraid last night was sort of the end of the road in terms of this NCAA discussion. I mean, you just can't keep doing on this rotation. For one thing, they're out of big dogs to go on the road and beat. They've already, you know, they've already been to Lubbock and played well. Dang near beat them in Lubbock, beat Tech in Lubbock. Already been to Kansas, been to West Virginia. It's not like you can, you know, they're not going to get to go to Michigan State and Arizona. So they're sort of out of bullets to play.
Yeah, Lunardi made the same point that if those 2 games hadn't been on the road, we probably wouldn't be having that conversation. That if they beat Kansas here and beat West Virginia here and lose on the road, it's a different outlook. He kind of compared OSU to St. John's, which has beat Villanova and Duke, has the 2 big wins, but everything outside of that just doesn't add up to a tournament resume.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, and it's that I think is a great point, because there are a lot of teams out there that would take wins at Allen Fieldhouse and West Virginia, and it would make their year because they'd have all these other wins. But Nathan, you mentioned this team sort of searching for the why, because you know, to have those 2 wins would usually be a resume maker. It would catapult you, but this team just hasn't been able to have the consistency. What are they saying, and what are you seeing that you can sort of point to and say, here's why this team hasn't been able to rattle off the wins?
Yeah, that's the confusing thing, is there isn't really a firm explanation on what's happening. Maybe one center point in it is Mitchell Solomon. He's a guy that when he's off the floor, OSU just isn't the same team. Even in their wins, when he's off the court, the score differential changes. Last night, OSU's down 20-16. He picks up his 2nd foul, leaves the court. OSU gets outscored 17-4 to end the half. That put them behind 17 at halftime and unable to come back from there. Same thing happened a week ago at Baylor. Even at West Virginia, when Mitchell Solomon was off the court, they just weren't the same team. He's not a guy who's going to put up big stats, but when he's on the court, he makes an impact. and it shows at the end of the game when you look at the score.
Well, and that to me, Barry, sort of speaks to the slim margin for error that this team has, and it got slimmer when Mike Boynton dismissed a couple guys. They just don't have the players, they just don't have the depth. Mitchell Solomon, an unbelievable story that he's having this kind of impact on this team, a guy that largely unheralded. And yet, to me, that sort of speaks to the bigger issue of where this team is right now.
Yeah, the problem is the Cowboys just don't have quite enough. Mitchell Solomon's a really good player, as you said. Great story. But if he's indispensable to you, then you probably don't have enough of a roster. So I actually think the Cowboys, this has been a solid season for the Cowboys. To me, they're not going to make the NCAA tournament, but we're at least talking about it. They were picked 10th to finish last in the Big 12. We had the FBI thing hit in the autumn. You don't even know what's going to become of OSU basketball. But they brought the focus back to basketball, and they've done some cool things. They beat Florida State. They won an overtime with Bedlam in Stillwater. Yeah. They went to Allen Fieldhouse and West Virginia Coliseum and won. And they made you think that this new coach they hired actually knows what he's doing. And I think he's been coaching his butt off. I think there's reason to be excited about the future in terms of who's in control. It's just disappointing that those victories weren't sustained by what should have been solid home wins, and the NCAA tournament is sort of out of the focus now.
What, Nathan, as you think about Mike Boynton's first year and now, sort of seeing the writing on the wall, I don't suspect that his focus will change. He wants to win every time they play. But does what he hopes to maybe get out of this last month or so of the season, does it start to change? Do you think he'll start to look for maybe some nuanced things as he looks towards next year?
I don't know if that's necessarily the case, but I know he wants to figure out whatever this focus, this execution issue is that has kind of plagued the Cowboys in each of their losses over the past month or so. It's been a constant theme is, oh, there was a 5-minute stretch we didn't focus, there was a 10-minute stretch we didn't focus, and that's what ends up costing them the game. I think he wants to get to a point where that feels resolved. Whether it's in this last stretch of Big 12 play or maybe during the NIT, something where they can figure out how to play 40 minutes on a consistent basis. OSU hasn't won back-to-back games since Big 12 play began. That is an issue. Obviously, it'll create an issue if they get to the Big 12 tournament where they need to win back-to-back games if they have any hope of making the NCAA tournament. But it just puts them in a position where they need to be able to find that consistency, and I think that's really what Boynton is trying to search for in this end of the season, to have some consistency that they can build on in the 2018-2019 season.
Barry, what do you look at if you're coaching this team? What do you want to see in this last month or so of the season?
I would like to see a little bit more development from Brandon Averett. They're going to need him next year. Kendall Smith will be gone. Kendall Smith played great down the stretch, but Averett's going to be key to. He was good earlier in the year and he's had some nice games. They're going to need him quite a bit next year. The core of McGriff, Waters, Averett. The problem. One of the problems with this team is they got 3 seniors that are, probably their best players in terms of Solomon, Smith, Jeffrey Carroll. So in some ways, they're going to be rebuilding off a team that's going to finish 8th, 9th, 10th. So this young core needs to continue to show signs. We saw a great game out of Lindy Waters in Morgantown, hit 3 clutch shots, including the game winner, and just took them without batting an eye. That was a great development that I saw out of Lindy. But you want to see that out of the younger guys that, hey, you're going to be missing your veterans next year. So are these younger guys ready to step up?
Nathan, go ahead.
So that's been nice to see the younger. You mentioned the shots that Lindy hit. Of course, he got hurt against Kansas State, took a hard fall to the floor, and so we don't know what his status yet is for Saturday's game in Fort Worth. But he's a guy. Cam McGriff has exploded onto the scene, 20-9 in both wins at Kansas and West Virginia. So that sophomore class is offering a lot of different things that I think can build some excitement going forward. But as you mentioned, there needs to be more. You'd like to see a little more out of some of those lower tier guys. At a point, Tom Sazagua missed 11 straight 3-pointers, I think, in some recent games. Brandon Averett, you'd like to get a little more from him. But there's definitely a base here. There's definitely something to build on in these next couple of years.
As much as we see some positives out of this season, guys, one of the things that's been disappointing from where I'm sitting is the fan numbers it's not been there for these home games. And I understand a lot of them have been weekday games, these very games we're talking about OSU struggling, and it's tough for people to get to Stillwater for especially those 6 o'clock starts. And then you add in, they had a Valentine's night game, Nathan. I mean, they're not exactly getting much help with the scheduling here to get fans there. But what's the sense you're getting from why people maybe aren't turning out, even though OSU's had some big wins? They've given their fans a reason to come and be excited, and yet we haven't sort of seen that come together in people coming through the turnstile.
Wednesday night's game was actually pretty decently attended for what it was. Valentine's Day game at 6 p.m. OSU was able to draw over 7,000 was the announced attendance. They'd been floating somewhere near the low 6,000s their last couple home games, so they were able to draw a little bit better on Wednesday. But I think it's just a matter of OSU isn't winning or playing as well at home as they are on the road, even in their wins that they've gotten in Big 12 play. OU and Iowa State, they go to overtime, inched by Texas, whereas they are competitive in all of their road games with the exception of the Baylor game. So it's something where Mike Boynton has said we deserve, or our fans deserve, to see us play the same way in Gallagher Arena that they've seen on the road from us recently.
What about it, Barry? Has the fan numbers, has that been a little surprise in your mind that there hasn't sort of been the attendance there?
No, I'm surprised it's been as high as it's been. I mean, you're talking about a program that people remember the glory days, and it's just gone down for the last 12 years. One NCAA tournament win in 12 years. The energy's sort of gone. You get some energy with a new coach, and Brad Underwood, he leaves after 1 year. Then the FBI investigation, and you think, what kind of program are we running? And then you're in a conference that signs away its soul to play a bunch of 6 p.m. midweek games. Let me promise you, you can win all you want to. You can play in any place you want to. If you play at 6 o'clock on a Tuesday in Stillwater, Oklahoma, it's going to be hard to draw a crowd. So, to me, they're just, people are whistling in the wind. There are ways to fix the attendance problem, and it's not the fans who need to change. It's the institutions, and it starts with the tip times. You can't play if you're not in Lawrence, Kansas, in the Big 12. Don't play at 6 o'clock in the midweek. Don't do it.
That seems like a conversation for another day, guys, but I agree, because you're talking about places in the Big 12 that fans have to drive, whether it's Ames, Iowa, or Morgantown, West Virginia. Most of their fans are driving in. Good topic for another day. But before we get out of here, Nathan, game at TCU on Saturday. We just assume OSU wins. That's what they do on Saturdays on the road, right?
Saturdays are weird. Bruce Weber, Kansas State's coach, said after the game, we were just happy to not have to play them on a Saturday. So it's a weird thing. It's a weird trend. I think Lindy's health will have a lot to do with it, just considering how big of a piece he's been for them. Really versatile defender, great shooter, as we saw against West Virginia. So he's a big piece for them. If not, Tavares Shine's back healthy, so he'll slide into the starting lineup. But again, that's going to affect their depth, which has been an issue. TCU handled OSU pretty well in Gallagher Arena. OSU didn't play with a whole lot of energy. That was probably arguably the worst of their 3 recent home losses. So now they're in a position where they need to go 4-1, most likely, to make an NCAA tournament berth. So it's a game where OSU is definitely capable of winning. I don't think if a team goes in Allen Fieldhouse and WVU Coliseum and wins, you can count them out of any game. But it's just been such a roller coaster, been such an up and down, that it's hard to really just make a prediction and say what's going to happen.
All right, Saturday, it's a 7 o'clock start, of course, on the road, 7 o'clock. Easy tip time there down in TCU. ESPN2 or ESPNU for you folks who want to watch it out there on TV. Be sure to stay with the best coverage team anywhere at newsok.com and every day in the Oklahoman.